Professor Saifur Rahman, distinguished participants and office bearers of the participating organizations. A good day to all. From this meeting onwards, we have upgraded the Zoom to a webinar platform, which can accommodate nearly 10,000 persons.
Wow. Okay.
So in that, there is no meeting ID. You click the link and give the password. So then you are in the meeting. In this, there is a panel for the Q&A session. Unlike the previous one, previously we have the chat windows. There's a Q&A session. A Q&A window. You can switch on and click the Q&A window and give your questions there. That will be answered. In our effort to present currently relevant topics before this August, more than 200 participants from India and 15 countries. Today we have a currently relevant topic: global electric power sector energizing with environmental issues, emerging with environmental issues. We bring before you a world-famous authority on the subject, Professor Dr. Saifur Rahman, Professor and Director, Virginia Tech Research Institute. This program is brought to you by 7 professional bodies of the country. This is a 15th program of our series, starting from April 15. We gratefully acknowledge the support by the participants, and we look forward to your support in the future also. There is some delay in the from our part to furnish the recordings of the sessions because of some logistic issues. So soon we will be covering up the backups, and we have a program to furnish participation certificates to those who demand it. We have a feedback link. You can click it and give your feedback, and from that we will pick up the email ID and send the link to the recordings. And those who ask for participant certificates, that also will be provided. And those whose names are not shown in their against your name, against your link, please rename it. Now I invite Dr. Krishna Kumar, President of the PMI Kerala Chapter, to give the welcome address. Dr. Krishna Kumar.
Thank you, Harinderlal, and hi all. Good morning and good afternoon from people from different countries. As Harinderlal said, we have people from 15 around countries, and I'm Dr. Krishna Kumar, President of PMI Kerala Chapter. 7 societies joined together in conducting this series of webinars during this COVID-19 situation for members to keep and up to date of their knowledge, and we have experts from all parts of the world sharing their great knowledge to us. And we already conducted a series of knowledge sessions, and this is the 15th session conducted on behalf of the inter-society webinar. And the key societies that are collaborating are IEEE Kerala Section, Institute of Engineers, Kerala State Center, Internet Society of India, Trivandrum Chapter, Computer Society of India, Trivandrum Chapter, Vaikam Maulavi Foundation Trust, Trivandrum, IEEE Engineering in Medicine and the Biology Center, Kerala Chapter, and Project Management Institute, Kerala Chapter. So I would like to offer my welcome to the speaker, Professor Saifur Rahman, Director, Virginia Tech Advanced Research Institute, USA, to this great event. We are all eagerly waiting to hear from you on the global electric power sector, engaging with the environmental issues. I would like to offer my voice of welcome to the moderator A.G. Harindralal of IEEE. Introduction of speaker will be done by A. Suhair of Vaikam Maulavi Foundation Trust, and vote of thanks done by Professor V.K. Damodaran. I would like to offer my voice of welcome to all of you who have taken time in attending this great session. Let's hear from the great session from Professor Saifur Rahman. Over to A. Suhair for the introduction of the speaker. Thank you so much.
Professor Saifur Rahman and distinguished participants of this webinar. Good morning and good evening to all. I am delighted to introduce today's speaker, Professor Saifur Rahman, whom I know personally for more than a decade. Professor Saifur Rahman is a multifaceted personality. He's a teacher, a researcher, a consultant, an administrator, author, editor, and above all, a leader of inimitable qualities and unbridled energy. He's a life fellow of IEEE and a winner of IEEE Millennium Award. He is the founder and director of the famous Virginia Tech Advanced Research Institute and a professor of electrical engineering there. I first met Professor Saif in 2009 in UAE when he came to organize the headquarters execom of PES outside the US. It was a very memorable grand gala function, the memories of which still linger in our minds. Subsequently, we met in Kota Kinabalu in 2018 when he came to inaugurate the Asia Pacific Power Energy Conference. Then we also met in Bangalore when he came to inaugurate the India Council of PES, a confederation of the PES chapters in India, and a great initiative of Professor Saifur Rahman. And Engineer Harindralal had the fortune to receive the Outstanding Chapter Award from Professor Rahman in 2018 at Portland, Oregon, when Kerala chapter won the Outstanding Chapter Award globally. To explain Professor Saifur Rahman's profile is a very exhausting task. It's not going to fit in the time slot available to me. So I'm going to be a little bit brief on his activities in IEEE and other places. He held many responsible positions in IEEE as well as in other professional areas. He was in the board of directors of IEEE as the vice president of publications. He was the founder editor-in-chief of IEEE Transactions on Sustainable Energy, Electrification magazine. He was also the chair of the United States National Science Advisory Committee. And he is a distinguished lecturer traveling extensively throughout the world, visiting so many countries and talking about the latest in technology, particularly on smart grid, IoT, and related topics. He has published more than 140 research publications in the journals and over 400 conference presentations. So great achievement for him. And he has also managed several energy projects globally throughout the world. Today he will be discussing one of the very significant topic on electrical energy, engaging in environmental challenges. This is a very significant topic for all of us. Professor Saif is a very jovial, friendly, pleasant, approachable, likable personality. He's a candidate for the IEEE President-elect. We hope that his energy and knowledge and wisdom and experience will help to deliver the goods if he succeeds in this position. We all wish him the best in the upcoming elections, and we hope that IEEE will be much more benefited by his services at higher realms. Over to you, Saif. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Should I start now?
Yeah.
Over.
Over to you.
Okay, let me share my screen, please. Okay, I will share my screen so you can see the whole thing. There you go. So can you share my screen? See my screen now, Shankar?
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yes, sir.
Well, good evening to all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. And I'm very grateful to hear such kind words from my good friend Suhair, who has known me for 11 years or more. I have been to Kerala, to Kochi multiple times. I am a runner, so I usually run by the riverside, the water side in Kochi. They're my pleasant memories that I have had for many years. So I am very happy to be back, at least virtually, to the Kerala section. Thank you. Again, as you have seen, focus on two things: the global power sector and how it contributes or sometimes helps to reduce the impact of CO2 in the global environment. That's the theme of my talk. So if I can go to the next slide, where you see on the left-hand side of the screen, world electricity production in 2017 by source, fuel source that is. Highest is coal. India is also big on coal, 38%. Second highest is natural gas, about 23%. Third hydro, fourth nuclear by source. On the right-hand side of the screen, I have the number, top 10 countries which are consuming electricity. China number 1, US to India number 3. It's a big country, big population. So it is the top 3 in India is the consuming countries. Now, next slide, if I show it to here, just overall idea globally. The dark, almost black is the US and China, which China 7 billion, 7 trillion watt hours. Then US 4 billion terawatt hours, India 1.6. So China 7, US 4.5, India 1.6. Russia, Japan, Canada, all that. So this is good. This is the production 2018. This is very important slide. Coal, you saw, contributes the highest amount of fuel burned for power generation. Fine. But where is the coal usage coming from? 75% of global demand for coal is coming from Asian countries. Primarily China, you can see the picture here, India, then Southeast Asia, that's Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the like, and the rest of the world is at the bottom. That's the breakdown. If you look at the right-hand side of the screen, it's more significant. What I'm watching here, the investment in new coal plants are decreasing. 2010, 10 years ago, contracts were signed for investing in 100 gigawatt of coal, 100 gigawatts, that is 100,000 megawatt equivalent capacity coal plants, 2010. That number has dropped to about 22 in 2018. That means not too many new coal plants are being planned or invested in. In fact, the World Bank has a policy, they will not invest in any coal-fired power plant, nothing at coal plants. This is pushing the number down. Is it good or bad? That's a different story, but coal consumption is going down. About 4 years ago, the highest fuel usage for power in US was coal. 4 years ago, coal. Now it is natural gas. Coal has dropped. That's a global trend. So we'll see which countries are still using a lot of coal. Now, if I go to the next slide, on the left-hand side is the top 20 countries that emitted the most CO2 4 years ago. A reason for that, I'll come to that in a few minutes. 4 years ago, China contributed 9 billion tons of CO2. US 4.8, India 2.0, 4 billion US, 2.0 billion India. Look at this picture here. If you go to Number 10 country, Saudi Arabia was 10th. Total emission per country, 10th. And when I talk to my friends in China, India, and other places, the big population, they say, don't look at the big, complete overall number, look at per person number. We are a big country, many people, so we generate a lot. And I'm coming to that in a second. Saudi Arabia is number 10 in overall CO2 production globally, India number 3. If you focus on the right-hand side of the screen here, which countries are contributing the highest amount of CO2 country-wise? China, 29%, highest. US, 16%. India, 7%. Russia, only 5%. So if I look at the countries contributing 10% or more, it's only US and China. Next is India. Fine. So look at this picture on the left, China number 1, Saudi number 10. Now look at this slide on the left-hand side. Saudi became number 1. When you divide the total CO2 emission by the number of people, Saudi Arabia number 1. China was 1, now became 12. India number 20, it was 3 before. So this is the debate globally goes on. Do I count the total emission or count the emission per person? So US is now Australia number 2, US number 3. So we have this debate, we'll talk about that going forward, but I'm going to show you now what is happening in our industry to bring those numbers down. Now, let's look at the CO2 emissions from fossil fuel combustion, not only electricity, in other processes like cement production, steel production. If you do all of those, China is 30% CO2 emission breakdown. US, the number 2, 15%, EU 9%, India 7%. If I look at the data now, 6 years later, India will be number 3, if not, number 3, not number 2. US will be number 2. Fine. Now look at CO2 emission from fuel combustion. Again, for all sources, not just electricity production, cement, and many other things. Coal, 2016, was responsible for 44% of global CO2 emission. Oil, 34.8%. Natural gas, 20.4%. If you recall, let me go back very quickly. If you look at this picture here, oil is only 3.3% for electricity production. How come oil is so big, 34%? What happened? This picture is fuel combustion, all sources, including transportation. That's why the number is so high, 34%. And natural gas is mainly power generation and some industrial processes. That's on the left-hand side. Right-hand side by region. OECD developed in the countries, industrialized countries like Europe, US, Mexico, Canada, and so on, more than a third, 35.9% for CO2. China, the number 2, which is 28.2%. Non-OECD Asia, this is kind of red slice, is 12%. That includes India. The rest are there. Middle East only 5.5, only 3.8%. So that's fine. Middle East 5.5%. Countries like, if I go back to other countries, Europe 7.3%. Just to have some reference points for you to think about. If I go to the next slide, I'm now focusing on Europe only, not India, OECD, only Europe. In Europe, 31% of CO2 is coming from energy, mainly electricity and some cement applications. Manufacturing, 22%, second highest. Households, your homes, your businesses, you generate, use power and generate CO2. And transportation, 12%. 5 years ago, the 12% number has gone up quite a bit. I'll give you data in a few minutes. That's Europe. Look at this picture, very interesting. China is the biggest CO2 generator, we all know that. 2001, China was getting about a quarter, 25% of electricity came from hydro, solar, wind. and 73.5% came from thermal, remainder came from nuclear, 2001. 2016, 15 years later, that number has grown from 25 to 34% almost. So hydro is more than a third of China's power generation. 2018, that became 37. 2030 will become more than half of China's electricity will come from hydro, solar, wind, and 42% will be from coal and thermal, and remaining 6% will be nuclear. So that's helping, but not enough yet. This is the important data. This number is from year 2000. Electric power sector was responsible for 1/3 or 33% of CO2 production, 1/3. Transportation also 1/3. Direct use in industry like steel mill, cement, and other applications, fertilizer, 20%. And residential, commercial, another 12%. That's the global breakdown for anthropogenic, meaning man-made CO2. Much more CO2 is produced in the oceans, much more. And those are absorbed back in the ocean again. Trees consume CO2. But when a tree is cut, you burn it, you produce CO2 again. So all this is balanced. People ask me this question. What was the issue 200 years ago? And that was fine. What is the problem now? Problem now is we are adding about 40 billion tons of CO2 per year to the global atmosphere and causing climate change issues. Anyway, 2000 numbers. If I look at numbers today, which is 2020, I mean, 20 years later, electric power plants' contribution to carbon emissions is about 28% now, 28%. Transportation has reached close to 40%. So my point is, we in the power industry can be careful, produce more solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, all that. But if transportation sector keeps on growing, the global problem would not be solved. And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. So this is where we are today. We talk about CO2, but there are other greenhouse gases that we should be aware of. CO2 number 1, we know that. Methane number 2, nitrous oxide number 3, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride are the other 5 greenhouse gases. We know all of these. Sulfur hexafluoride, SF6, used in substations where you want to have compact construction. So rather than let the circuit breaker operate in air, let it operate in SF6 chamber to reduce the chance of spark. That's SF6 used for. 1997, global emission from fossil fuel and cement production was 30 billion tons, 97. 2018, that became 41 billion tons, is now higher than that number today. Okay, now look at the 6 greenhouse gases. You will ask the obvious question, how dangerous are those other 5 gases? Are they as bad as carbon dioxide or whatever it is? Look at this picture. Global warming potential of greenhouse gases. If I use CO2 as my reference, number 1, methane is 28 times more damaging, I guess, than CO2 for global warming. What does it mean? That means 1 ton of methane is equivalent to 28 tons of CO2 as a global warming gas. Interesting. Nitrous oxide, 265 times. Hydrofluorocarbons, 138 times. Perfluorocarbons, another fluorocarbon, 6,630 times. Look at our SF6, 23,500 times potent than carbon dioxide. The good thing is we have very little amount of SF6 released into the atmosphere. That's why it is not causing much of a problem yet. Well, look at this picture. This is my data. I have taken into account the concentration amounts and redrawn that number. So this is data factored in concentration. With that, even then, 3/4 or 76% of greenhouse gas emissions or global warming potential, CO2. Why? Because we produce much, much more CO2 than any other global warming gas. That's why 76%. Next is methane, 16%. Nitrous oxide, 6%. Others, HFC, PFC, SF6, only 2%. That is why we have to focus more on carbon dioxide today. Okay, now US number. Where is CO2 coming from? Or what is the CO2 emissions? It's 82% of the greenhouse gases, 82%. Globally was 76% globally, right? US is 82%. Next, methane, 10%. Globally was 16%. Nitrous oxide, 6%. Rest are 3%. US numbers. Okay. Now, since methane is an issue with us, let's see where it's coming from. The 6 sources of methane: natural wetlands, when like a paddy field or other vegetation goes underwater, and it has methane. Paddy field, we know all of that. Kerala is a good example. Paddy, when you sow the paddy seed, paddy grows, and it is in the water, it will release methane. Emission from livestock production system, like your cows and animals, a lot of them will create methane, obviously. Biomass burning, including forest fires. So biomass, when you burn biomass contains methane, like garbage, for example, and it will give off methane. And aerobic decomposition, not burning, and aerobic decomposition of organic waste like landfills. You know, India has done the same thing. You go to the trash dump, organic waste, and you see gas coming out. That's methane. And then, of course, fossil methane emission during exploration and transportation of fossil fuel. Of course, when you drill for oil, the first thing that comes out usually is natural gas. Natural gas is all methane. Also, when you transport that fuel, it leaks, natural gas, leaks and gives off methane. That's one reason why Qatar is contributing significant amount of methane generation and CO2. Let's take a second here. What's the issue there? Qatar didn't show up on my list, but I've talked to them. Qatar is world's largest LNG exporter. Natural gas has methane primarily, also CO2. In Qatari natural gas, about 75% is methane and 20-some% CO2 and rest of other gases. There's no point liquefying all of that, including CO2, and send it by ship to Japan, let's say. They will then take it out and they will create CO2. So that has no value, right? CO2 doesn't burn, methane burns. What Qatar does, it extracts the CO2 from natural gas and then liquefies only this methane part. Then goes to the destination, no CO2. Even though Qatar is not burning any coal, because of their extraction of CO2 from the natural gas, adding to their national total. Interesting way of finding out where this CO2 coming from. Okay, now this is very interesting data. Emission characteristics from different power plants burning different fuel. The top row is NOx, SO2, carbon dioxide. Vertically is gas, oil, and coal. Let's see, we are calculating if you produce 1 kilowatt hour of electricity from different fuels, what is the net result of gas emission? If you produce 1 kWh of electricity from natural gas, you're producing 490 grams of CO2 and 2.32 grams of NOx. Very little SOx, SO2. It's not a coal is big on sulfur, not natural gas. Okay, if you produce the same electricity from oil, you are producing 781 gram or 3/4 kilogram of CO2. Coal, same 1 kWh will give you 9.26 grams of sulfur dioxide and 1,090 grams of CO2. Two problems. Sulfur dioxide, SO2, when mixed with water, H2O, becomes H2SO4, sulfuric acid. That is why coal plants produce SO2, which are called acid rain gases, acid rain, SO2, sulfuric acid. Now look at this. If I have an option or a choice to produce electricity from coal, oil, or gas, I'll go for gas because it's half the output for CO2. Just keep in mind going forward. Now, again, back to methane. We think hydro plants are good, they're clean, they are environmentally benign. Not really. Hydro plants produce significant amount of methane. How does it happen? When you build a dam, and you build a dam in a place where there's water, obvious, not in a desert, water means it has vegetation, trees, other vegetation. As you build the dam, behind the dam, the vegetation will be submerged in water. It will be submerged, rot, and give off methane. One time, fine. In addition to that, the water level behind the dam changes in height. In the dry season, water level is low. You see low water in my picture. And then water level is low on the right hand, on the side of the hill. The water is not there. It's moist but no water. It'll begin to grow vegetation. Then as the monsoon season approaches, water level rises, that vegetation is now covered in water. When the vegetation is submerged, it'll give off methane. That goes up, and that happens every year. So that's why I'm saying you cannot call hydro very clean. It's clean in the sense no CO2 directly, but methane is an issue. Okay, these are the countries which are, they had the 6 countries which have the highest amounts of hydro. Russia, number 1, almost 8 million hectares of land is submerged because of hydro, 8 million hectares. Number 1, US number 2, almost 7, 6.98. Canada 3, 6.5. China 5.8 million hectares. India 4.5 million. Brazil almost 4 million. So these are the countries which have submerged all this much land because of the damming activity, and that is causing some methane emission. Just to know, reference point. Okay, now I'm summarizing what I just said. If you produce 1 kilowatt hour of electricity from coal, you produce 1,090 grams of CO2. 1 kWh of hydro-based electricity releases 225 grams of CO2 equivalent, not CO2, CO2 equivalent, meaning it's a methane, and methane is 18 times potent than CO2. So if you do the conversion, I get this number. So it is less than natural gas. There was 490 gram natural gas, but coal is not, hydro is not 0. Similar question comes up about CO2 production from manufacture to use of gasoline in vehicles. Here's the number. 1 liter of gasoline releases 3 kilograms of CO2 from manufacture to consumption in a vehicle. That means when you are drilling for oil, you produce CO2, transport that crude oil by ship to a refinery, gets refined, in the process produce CO2, and as you burn that fuel, like gasoline, in your car, it gives up CO2. So that means if you are using 1 liter of gasoline to go, let's say 20 kilometers in your car, you've added 3 kilograms of CO2 in the sky. This is why, because of strong growth of vehicles globally, the contribution of CO2 from transportation sector has gone up and power sector has gone down. So what is the solution? We can reduce carbon emissions from electricity production in our field, use less electricity. If you use less, you burn less coal, oil, gas, okay. Or use less fuel to produce electricity. How do you do this? Make the plant more efficient. Like combined cycle power plants are almost 60% efficient today. And a coal plant is about 40% efficient. If you have a choice, go for combined cycle. Or finally, you can produce more electricity from nuclear and renewables than no CO2. That's fine, except keeping in mind your hydro plant has some CO2 equivalent production. Okay, top 10 countries which have the highest amount of renewable energy, 2018 data, 2 years ago. China number one, about 700 gigawatt. US about 250 gigawatt, Brazil, Germany, India, very close, about 100 some gigawatts. Last 2 years, because of strong push in India for solar and wind, that number has gone up. So India is probably more than Germany now in terms of renewable energy capacity. Brazil is big because of hydro. That's the left-hand side. Right-hand side of the screen shows what is the breakdown between these three sources, hydro, wind, and solar photovoltaics. So among the renewable energy generation, about half, 48% comes from hydro, onshore wind, 23%, solar PV, 20%. Both onshore wind and solar PV are growing very fast. So maybe if I look at that number 2-3 years from now, it would be much more than hydro between the wind and solar combined, more than hydro. Okay, as I speak, you see I have given references at the bottom of my screen. So if you want to do more studies, more research, as you heard, this is being recorded. So go up to the recorded version, look at this slide, and do your own research. If you're an academic or a student, want to do more work in this field, fine. Then the question is, fine, renewable is fine, but how much do they cost? I'm giving you for 7 sources: biomass, geothermal, hydro, solar PV, concentrated solar power, thermal solar power, offshore and onshore. Biomass is the longest line. The green is the longest. Why? Because the cost of energy from biomass varies from country to country because of the source of biomass is not absolute. It can change from, like in India, in one case, Brazil, something very different. Range is very high, but the global average of electricity from biomass about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Geothermal about 7 cents, hydro 4 cents a kilowatt hour, solar PV about 8 cents, concentrated solar power, solar thermal about 17 cents, offshore wind more like 12, 13, onshore 6. The big difference, onshore 6, offshore over 13, twice as much. Why? Because it costs much more money to build offshore plants because of the water level, the issue of drilling in the seabed, many things happen. Anyway, so IRENA data 2019, if you go back to the source I showed you right here, irena.org, you'll get same numbers, same data if you want to know more information in this case. So what's the bottom line? Well, we are working hard in power industry to reduce the fossil consumption, pushing for renewables and nuclear, fine. However, if emission from transportation sector continues to grow like we're having experienced now, the power sector help would not be enough. We're still causing global warming. People say, well, fine, we will be using a lot of electric vehicles. You can, but the question is, you have to figure out where is the source of fuel that's giving you electricity. If it is coal-based, doesn't help much. If it is nuclear and fossil, it'll help. So keep that thought in mind. So this is, my technical talk is finished. I'd like to bring your attention, my observations in the IEEE's operations today. I have been a volunteer for 40 years now, active volunteer. I became a member of IEEE, student member in 1974. So I've seen many things. First of all, today's situation. Because of COVID-19, we see power production has gone down. coal usage has gone down, which is good. But you also know that this is not going to last forever. We'll come back to what I call new normal after some time. The new normal will be, I guess, less coal, less electricity, more EV and the like. But for that to happen, we need to cooperate more among ourselves like we're doing now. Like you're a very good example. This event you have advertised, people came from 15 countries. That's a good sign of collaboration, cooperation, and community spirit. I want to move that further. So I welcome and I commend the Kerala section to get this leadership. This is very good. I would like to see this happening more and more globally. For that to happen, we have to make IEEE more, my grandson visiting me, IEEE more global so that every member of IEEE can feel ownership and work hard to make IEEE more relevant. So for that to happen, we need more participation from many countries in IEEE governance. So broad-based IEEE will make this institute more relevant, more attractive to technologists and academics from all over the world. So this is interesting thing I like to see done. Other thing I like to draw your attention to is very important for me. I go to many countries of the world. I've noticed the number of senior members and IEEE fellows in regions 8, 9, and 10. 10 is India and Asia Pacific. 9 is South America. 8 is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. In those regions, numbers are smaller than I like to see. One reason is people think it is difficult to become a senior member, especially industry friends, they don't apply. It's not difficult. You apply yourself. All you need is qualification. If you have a bachelor's degree, you need 5 years of experience after bachelor's degree. You got a PhD, you need 3 years of experience, 3, not 5. Not difficult for industry friends. Then you apply, you need 3 references. I have done many references for many friends of mine. What I would like to see done, like your Kerala section, will have a database. Only senior members and fellows can write references. The database of senior members that exist in your section now and fellows, and make that available so other people can use that list and people that know each other and help them to become senior members. I would like to see that happen. IEEE fellows is more difficult, of course, but the requirements have been coming down. Now you need only 3 references, not 5, the case before 3, for the nomination package. And I have set up in IEEE Power Society PES a committee to help nominators to produce stronger nominations. And I would like to see that done across IEEE. So what is happening in PES, because nominations are better, we get a better success rate. So I like to keep that thought in your mind, help you to understand, discuss among yourselves at section level, chapter level, because we have so many members, unless they feel we care for them, unless they feel they have been recognized, they would not be very excited. Yes, people like us here, many of us are academics, we do for many other reasons, but I want to see more industry friends become and remain IEEE members. So that's all I have. That's my last slide, and here I am, as you heard before. I am a candidate for President-elect 2020, and I give you my email address here. I know there'll be questions after my talk is over, and I may not be able to have time to answer all your questions. So if I'm not able to answer your question, please feel free to write to me, and I'll answer them in writing. So again, I was a PS president. I was IEEE board member. I have developed what is known as PS University, a lot of content. Go to the PS website and find it. I have done corporate engagement program where the corporation pays the dues for members. That's interesting for India because if you look at the IEEE dues, like $100 or so, it's not easy for a young engineer to pay. But we have a program here where the company can pay and membership values goes to the engineer. I signed agreement with Bescom in Bangalore, electric supply company, end of last year to start that program in India. We've done that in China, US, and in India now. We also set up, this is the chapters councils in China, India, Africa, and so on. The council chair is from Bangalore, Dr. Nagaraja, and they are helping. That's the meeting that Suhair came, in fact, 2 years ago to Bangalore. So this is something I established, and I hope this takes off. Finally, my website is here, srahman.org. More information is there. More of my plans are there if you like to visit. And that's what I have. For the young members, I am in Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So that's it. I'll stop here. I stopped screen sharing and go back to Harinder Lal or somebody else to run the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rahman. There's a question from Radhakrishnan, Institute of Engineers. Why we are not comparing carbon dioxide emission per square kilometer area of each country also? Why we are not comparing carbon dioxide emission per square kilometer area?
You know, carbon emission is not happening from land, from square foot. Like if a desert, you don't produce any CO2. It's two ways. One is human beings, and second is transportation and power production. And both of those are affected by human beings, of course, right? Otherwise, it is not done. So you can, I've given you the total emission from China, like 7 billion tons. India, 1.62 billion tons. Divide by the land mass and figure out. And you will see Russia will be the lowest. Give you some numbers. Russia's land mass about 18 million square kilometers, 18 million. Second is Canada, like 12 million. US, Brazil, and China about the same, 5 million square kilometers. So if you do landmass division, Russia and Canada will look very good because they are so big, especially Canada, not much production. So there's a different debate, but I would, as I said, I'm talking about anthropogenic carbon emission, man-made. So if you say man-made, how many men or people are there? That's the issue. So I hope that answers your question.
Second question from an active YP from Chennai, VDV Warrior. How do you see the impact of power sector with so many renewable projects coming in, especially wind and solar? Curtailments are common, but it may not be a permanent solution. How can the grid be enhanced, prepared for those situations?
Yeah, Preeti Warrior, very good question. You're from Vestas. You are the wind person, okay? It is true. It is not a permanent solution, but I have another talk which I gave to IEEE Delhi. Is on my website, by the way, if you want to see that. I had this question. So I say, you're right. You cannot solve it with renewables only. In this world today, we have a lot of wastage of electricity for many reasons. So my other talk is smart grid and how can a smart grid help to make renewables more impactful and better. So I would not take too much time because that's another 45-minute talk, but please go ahead and look at my other solutions.
Another question from Hariharan. What is the comparable figures of carbon dioxide emission for gas, oil, LPG, etc.?
Well, I don't know if I get the question right. I gave you the data for electricity production from different fuels, coal, oil, and gas. So are you asking, should I compare oil and gas, or what should I compare? I don't see it in writing. Can you say that again, Harinder, that question? I don't see it on the screen, on my screen. Can you say,
what is comparable figures for carbon dioxide emission for gas, oil, LPG, etc.?
Okay, so if gas is 1, oil is 1.5. And if you talk about LPG, that's very similar to oil. So it'll be gas when I say gas, I mean natural gas. Natural gas is 1, LPG and petroleum will be 1.5. That's the ratio.
Next question from Bashir. From the chemistry side, we know that water is stronger absorber of infrared than carbon dioxide due to hydrogen bonding. Why is carbon dioxide made the main factor? From the chemistry side, we know that water is a stronger absorber of infrared than carbon dioxide due to hydrogen bonding. Why is carbon dioxide made the main factor?
Okay. Simply because it produced so much CO2. Some numbers. If I go back pre-industrial revolution, let's say 1850s, 150, 170 years from now, we didn't burn any coal or oil at the time. We still produce CO2. That is why we had at the time about 250 to 300 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere at the time. Now it is more like 450, and it's growing pretty fast. So we have to focus on man-made CO2 and other gases. We have been using CO2 being produced by the oceans, in fact, and they absorb them back. Trees absorb CO2, but a tree rots, it makes CO2 or makes methane, which is carbon global warming gas. So focus is not only the overall, focus is man-made. I give you the number 40 billion tons of CO2 going into the atmosphere. That is man-made CO2. If you look at the overall CO2 that is ocean generated, is 5 times as much, 5 times, but most of them get absorbed in the ocean again. So as CO2 is in the sky, it rains, CO2 comes down as particles and go into the ocean, and the ocean absorbs it and then releases again later on. So just make sure we're focusing on man-made CO2, not naturally produced CO2 or methane.
Another question from Neelandan G. In the long term, you mentioned renewables and nuclear as a better choice. How would nuclear power plants fare from the aspect of safety for countries like India with dense population?
That's a very good question. That is why very few countries today are pushing nuclear. Europe pretty much stopped, except France. US pretty much stopped. India is building some with Russian help. China is doing some. Middle East, Abu Dhabi is building one with Korean help. So because of the concern about safety like Fukushima, Chernobyl and the like, people are not comfortable, especially if you are doing nuclear in a densely populated country. Example, Singapore is very highly, very dense. They have no fuel source. But they have decided not to build a nuclear for the safety reasons, for example. And they've discouraged Indonesia from building nuclear because they are next door neighbor. So this is, you're right, this is an issue of safety, keeping people away from nuclear generation. But other thing is very expensive. Some numbers. Today, we can build a solar PV plant producing electricity at about $3 a watt, average number, install cost, $3 a watt. Nuclear, more like $8 a watt. So 2.5 times cost of nuclear compared to solar. Only thing is, nuclear works at night, solar does not, but that's a different story. Anything else?
Yeah. Another question from Vengadeshan. India has large reserve of coal, though with large ash content. Should it not continue to be an important fuel source for base power for some more time?
The answer is yes, and that's what's happening in India today. We call coal is a transition fuel. Till you have clean power from renewables, nuclear, whatever, coal will be your place to go. And it's not happening. India is building a lot of coal today. So the issue is Coal has, as you say, ash, SO2, so sulfuric acid, and CO2. It's very simple to extract the ash as the gas from the chimney goes out. Fairly easy to scrub the SO2 from the gas, but very difficult to scrub CO2. So this is why CO2 is not scrubbed, it is just let go. There are technologies called carbon extraction and called carbon capture, and CCS, carbon capture and sequestration. You capture it, and hold it somewhere, and talk about putting in a salt mine, underground reservoir, under the ocean. You can do that. But suppose someday it comes out, then what happens? So this is not that easy. Also, it is very expensive to capture and sequester carbon dioxide from fossil fuel burning power plants. The answer is yes. Short term, we have to do this, but we should make plan long term to get away from it. India is a good example. India is building so much solar. By 2020, the plan was to make 200 gigawatt. That hasn't happened yet, but India has a lot of government policies, central government, to promote solar and wind in India.
Venkateshan continues. What is the future of nuclear fusion power?
Okay. Nuclear fusion has not yet produced net energy. That means you're putting more energy to create the fusion environment than you get out of it. And this is going on for 50 years now. So it's a dream. Has not materialized. Work is going on in Russia. US work is pretty much stopped now on fusion. European countries, France has done some work, but I would not see, I can almost be very comfortable predicting you would not get a commercial fusion plant in next 20 years. Commercial, not test.
Another question from Dr. Bashir. What does Qatar do with carbon dioxide removed from the LNG?
Why or how?
What does Qatar do?
What does Qatar do? Okay. When you know, the density of methane and CO2 are different. It's like basically a centrifuge operation, filtering operation, where you extract the CO2 and then release it in the atmosphere, literally release it, and keep the methane. Methane is the one we're paying for. Methane burns, CO2 doesn't burn. So why ship? And also you have to, it is more difficult to liquefy CO2 than liquefy methane is other issue, to take it out. Otherwise, what will happen if you do not take it out? You liquefy the natural gas, the methane part of it. It is liquid, but then you got bubbles of CO2 in that pipeline that goes on the ship, and you're carrying the CO2 in a ship, frozen containers to your destination. That is, I guess, economically not good for you. That's what it is done.
Another question from Venu from engineerswanted.com. Is there any plan in the global level to get rid of coal power electricity, similar to what Australia is planning? Australia plans to stop in 2030.
Many countries, Australia included, UK, have said, US states, some of them, they say no fossil fuel based electricity by 2030, 2035, 2040, 2050, like this. US says 2050. California says 2030. Germany said, I think 2030. There is no fossil generation, including coal. So, you know, these are political decisions by governments, cannot be a global agreement. Well, we have the Paris Climate Change Agreement. This is not going very well because the US has pulled out. It has to be realized by countries themselves. Yeah, I showed you the China numbers. China was 76% coal in 2000. By 2030, it'll be 42% coal. So they have come down by half coal usage. India number is still growing, but not growing as fast because the wind and solar are taking the space. Hydro in India, not very successful. I was talking to a power secretary of India, couple of years back. He said during his tenure as power secretary, he helped to build like 20,000 megawatts of coal and only 2,000 megawatts of, or less, of hydro. So hydro in India, because political reasons, like this Damodar Valley example, in other places, is difficult to do, politically difficult. So it cannot be a global agreement, cannot be an agreement in the country itself because of the political and other legal challenges. So this is a different discussion.
Another question from Ravindranath. In Kerala, we depend more on hydropower. Will this reduce CO2 emission?
Well, you depend more on hydropower. That means you are using less fuel-based power station, less coal-based, less gas-based, obviously, right? So you are not adding to CO2 emission. But Kerala is part of India. So when you look at the country, we look at the whole country, not just Kerala as a state. So you are doing clean, but your neighbors may not be as clean. So the Indian government at Indian level from Delhi has to look at that. But you are right. You, as a Kerala resident, Kerala state person, will feel good that I did not add to the problem. But problem is all India, not just Kerala.
Another question from Ashok Kumar. CO2 emission in manufacturing the equipments for unconventional energy also to be considered? CO2 emission in manufacturing the equipments for unconventional energy also to be considered?
Yes, I think. Let me tell you what I think you're asking. People have asked me, solar is clean, no, but to make the solar panel, make the glass, make the frame, concentrating the silicon, you're using some fuel. And you're burning, let's say, oil or coal or whatever, right? Produce that CO2. We have done that research. We say the amount of CO2 that is produced in manufacturing, the building block of solar PV, glass, backside tracking on aluminum, it takes 2 to 3 years for the solar plant to pay back by not producing CO2. So after less than 3 years, the CO2 has been paid back that was used to make solar panel. So the answer to that question is yes, it is producing some, but in life of the solar panel, it has paid back, and now after 3 years, it is a clean fuel.
Razan, what is the future for electrical engineering in renewable energy?
Future for electrical engineering in renewable energy.
Yes.
I teach a course at Virginia Tech on renewable energy. It's a double E course at Virginia Tech. And this is very highly subscribed course. Many students take it. So that means people believe, students, that undergrads believe renewable will be a source of, I guess, fuel for the long term. And as an engineer, where do you contribute? Solar has intermittency, number one. Because of that, voltage changes. Because of that, power factor can change. So as an engineer, electrical engineer, you can look at those issues about power factor control, voltage control, stability from solar panels. Somebody may raise the question, in a power system, to make it stable, we need inertia. The large hydro, large coal have inertia. So they maintain frequency. If your supply is inverter based, like solar, which is electronic, right? DC to AC, then what is the inertia? So that debate is still going on. And an electrical engineer, you can study those issues and make contributions. Yes, there is room for double E's in renewable energy usage.
Professor Bijuna Kunju, thanks you for your marvelous talk. And another question from Dr. Anand Panikar. What is the potential contribution from reduction in use of energy? Reduction in use of energy. Reduction in use of energy. What is the potential contribution from reduction in use of energy.
A reduction in use of energy.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very good point. It is much cheaper to reduce consumption than keep on raising supply. So you can use, for example, we used to use incandescent electric bulbs. A 100-watt electric bulb incandescent requires some amount of energy. The same amount of light produced by LED light bulb today will use only 20% of that energy. So you are cutting 80% of electricity consumption by moving from incandescent to LED, as an example. You can also use variable speed drive motors to save that in air conditioners. You can do better insulation in your buildings, reduce the heat loss or heat gain. And you can use other references, for example, efficient refrigerators, efficient equipment at home to reduce consuming electricity and save CO2 emissions. Good question.
Professor P.S. Chandramohan is thanking you for your excellent talk. OPEC is there for fossil fuel sector. Can we think of organization of renewable energy product producers globally, and IEEE take a leadership for that?
That's a very good point. If I become president, I'll work on that. You're right, you're right. OPEC is there, so we can go to India, for example, big solar and wind program, Germany, US, and China, Australia, to make a committee of renewable energy producing countries to talk to each other, learn from each other. Very good point. I will keep that in mind. Thank you.
Venkateshan, a senior member from Chennai, thanking you very much for your extremely interesting and illuminating talk. And the last question, Nesma Nujum Nayas, what about IRENA?
IRENA, okay, yeah. IRENA is a UN agency, and it is not in like OPEC, is not country-wise. Like IRENA, IEEE UN agencies, they are a platform where you can go to ask questions. They also do a lot of studies. IRENA is headquartered in Abu Dhabi, by the way. I just go to irena.org and see they have data. Some of the data I've given you today came from IRENA sources. So this is a good place to find information for your work. You can even propose to IRENA, you want some studies done to get some answers in India, for example, like somebody asked, if I use hydro, are we using CO2 less? Yes, but am I creating more methane by submerging the land with vegetation? You can do a study on that topic. Good point.
So the question is finished. Now we are moving to the last part of the program. Vote of thanks by Professor V.K. Damodaran. I invite Professor V.K. Damodaran to give you the vote of thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Harindral. Professor Saifur, already we have extended the originally scheduled time. So I do not want to be too long in proposing vote of thanks to you as well as to our distinguished listeners. First of all, I should say that this evening, as far as India is concerned, we have an excellent treat on the subject of connecting energy with ecology and economy. And in fact, this relation, as
You lose him?
Yes.
He is muted. Professor Damodaran, can you unmute yourself? You're muted.
Professor VKD, you are muted. Please unmute.
He's back, I think. Shankar, can you unmute him?
Sorry. I come back.
Yeah.
Somehow I was actually signed out of the chain. I hope I am audible now.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Professor, you have actually very lucidly and in a very well all these aspects have been very well looked into, and I think that was a wonderful treat. And we were actually expecting, at least at the Power and Energy Society, for a long time to have a talk of yours like this. And luckily, ശബ്ദം ഉണ്ടാക്കല്ലേ.
Sir, we can't hear you. He lost connection.
Yeah, we lost him, looks like.
Yeah, he's back.
He's back.
Sir, we can't hear you. Professor VKD, we can't hear you.
I think
Yeah,
there is
unmute.
some
Okay.
network problem.
Okay, sir, go ahead.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so let me cut short because of the internet unsteady condition. I had to be in and out. I'm extremely sorry about that one. Let me thank Professor Saifur for such a very relaxed but very extended treatise on power system vis-a-vis the ecological and other economical issues in pursuing not only planning for power expansion, but also for research studies, as well as in setting the new normal post-COVID. So this has been an excellent opportunity, and we hope that with your erudition and expertise, you will be active in IEEE, in whole of IEEE activities, particularly on power and energy issues for many more years in different and higher capacities that you have already held. So wish you well in your coming contest, as well as in your academic and technical interactions, which I'm sure all the listeners of today will contact you with your website as well as through your email, and we will be richer as far as the latest knowledge on power and energy are concerned. So we have enormous amount of thanks for you for making available your time today and addressing not only those who are from Kerala section, from many other professional societies active in Kerala, plus all over India, plus maybe another 12 or 13 more countries today. So this has been a great experience. Thank you very, very much. And for all the listeners or those who are participants to this talk, let me thank you for your continued interest and joining these programs with more enthusiasm and eagerness every week. So to you also, on behalf of all the organizing institutions, professional societies in Kerala, and the other organizations who are actually regular visitors to this program, very hearty thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Damodaran, Ms. Harendralal, Suhair, Shankar, and many friends in Kerala, India, all over the world. I really appreciate. What I like today is very in-depth questions. That means you are serious and you listen to me what I said. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.